Pundit, Nelson Dale. With me, I've also got Usbum Chigeliso Novuyo Zanga. I've got Sisa Mafu listening in the background. I've got Tobela Mdaga listening in the background. There's big news coming out of Australia. We're not going to beat around the bush here. Nelson, straight to the point, mate. How's the reaction in Australia? Welcome everyone around the world to the Sports Interval. I'm your host, Pila Bitterhout. Today I'm joined in by our Australian pundit, Nelson Dale. With me, I've also got Usbum Chigeliso Novuyo Zanga. I've got Sisa Mafu listening in the background. I've got Tobela Mdaga listening in the background. There's big news coming out of Australia. We're not going to beat around the bush here. Nelson, straight to the point, mate. How's the reaction in Australia after Raelene Castles resigned last night?
It's actually really torn. You got a large portion of Australians that did back Raelene Castles, and they feel that she's been bullied out by not only a few people that stand to benefit from her resignation, but also the broadcaster, who again is someone who could probably benefit from her leaving. It's probably worth pointing out a lot of players, a lot of ex-captains for the Wallabies, they wanted her gone. They haven't been willing to offer any solution forward for me.
I mean, who's next to take up the CEO position after Raelene Castles?
There's been a few names that have been touted and have been thrown out there. So before she actually got the job, the main man that everyone expected, Kearns. Yeah. Apparently he didn't necessarily nail the interview process, and she came through and had a bit better vision. She didn't necessarily sell that vision to Australia. I think she did do a good job, but everyone's talking about there needs to be some clear air so that I think the vision and a proper path forward to sort of fix Australian rugby is there. Phil Kearns, he's a guy that, I mean, he's been involved in rugby. Everyone knows who he is. He's got a lot of strong relationships. I don't know if he's the man to go forward. He's got Nick Farr-Jones there as well, another ex-Wallaby who's saying he wants to be the chairman. Together, they might be able to do some good for Australian rugby, but it's sad to see that it had to happen this way.
Yeah, speaking of Nick Farr-Jones, I mean, the guys have been very, very vocal. Also, another Australian coach, quite a well-known coach, Bob Dwyer, was quite vocal in terms of talking about things like Israel Folau might be coming back or wanting him to come back. I mean, is that a possibility? Maybe he spends 1 year with NRL and then comes back in 2020.
Honestly, I don't think so. Rugby's got some pretty solid values, and I think as a sport, that's why a lot of people follow rugby. I think the main thing that we all know and we all understand about rugby is inclusivity. Rugby in Australia and Sydney specifically, we've got a team called the Sydney Convicts, inclusive team, very well known in Australian rugby, and I mean that's something we want to uphold. We want the rugby to be a game played by everyone, and unfortunately he's allowed to have his views, he's allowed to have his opinions, express them, and then to say that he wouldn't continue to share them. I don't think that meets the values of Australian rugby. I think we're much more likely to see him in the NRL.
Vic, do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple, Nelson. How, this Raelene Castles resignation, it seems a bit like, Australian rugby shooting off in the foot a bit, especially at a time like this where you need someone who can at least see through these COVID-19 choppy waters, and then maybe hand over the reins to someone else after that. Do you share that view?
Yeah, look, I think for me, I think the way forward would have been to let her see out this period that we're going through at the moment. It's pretty turbulent times. I don't think they needed to add to that tricky sort of period that they're trying to come through. Throw in the fact that she's still contracted with Australian Rugby. She was taking a pay cut. So how's that going to play out? Are they going to have to pay her out? We're struggling with money as it is in these times, so we're going to have to pay her out and get someone else in. The thing that keeps getting thrown around is they wanted clear air. So they wanted clear air in Rugby Australia. They didn't want to have all this stuff hanging over, whether that means there's some relationships that are strained with Raelene Castles and other people in Australian rugby. That's what it sounds like. Obviously, we don't know everything, but they just wanted someone in that role to move forward without any of those restrictions. I think it's the right time, but hopefully this is something that we can use to push forward and we can make some positive changes in the game.
Just from my side, on my side as well, has there any been news after obviously the news that came out that she resigned? Has there been news with Raelene? Has anything came out in terms of what he's going to be standing, he's going to take?
No, look, sadly, it sounds like he hasn't been talked to at the moment. I think when this all came out, you kind of hoped that, or I kind of hoped that he'd already been told about it as it was happening. The Rugby Australia reached out to him, and it sounds like that hasn't really happened. To be honest, before this all sort of broke, Raelene Castles came out herself, and she was asked a similar question, will he stay if she goes? And Castles had to say that basically she thinks he will what. He's enthused by the fact that we're coming through. There's some positives there. It's going to be a clean slate for him. There's a new coaching team around him. So realistically, I think it's a good position for him to be in. Sam was a big part of getting him there, and I think he wanted to work in unison with her. But this is rugby at an international level. I mean, things change, and he's not going to. It's not going to be a surprise. And can lose their jobs. Things can change, and I don't think it will change his position. But he definitely threw his support into it.
Were you good?
Yeah, I also wanted to ask about just expound a little bit for me the broadcast deals that Raelene had obviously torn up. She was going to shake up the broadcast landscape there before she resigned. How influential are the broadcasters going to be in who takes over next?
It depends who gets in. Right now, my gut tells me it could well be Phil Kearns. He was in top sort of running for last role and before she took over Fox Sports. So this whole period's been pretty turbulent, and there's been a clear campaign to remove Raelene Castles because after 20 years of this partnership with Fox Sports, she took our broadcasting rights to the market, and we were looking for a different sort of pathway, more similar to what you see in American sports. So a lot more streaming on your phone, on your computers, a bit more free to air rather than all just behind a paywall. And Fox Sports didn't like that. And sadly, Fox Sports is owned by one of the biggest media companies in Australia. That's what's best for Australia. But I mean, it's pretty convenient that they brought her down specifically with this targeted campaign. And now he's the name that's been put out there.
Very good, very good. I mean, I just want one more question.
Yep.
How soon can we hear about the next person to take over?
I haven't heard any dates. There's a few names that have been touted, have been thrown out there. Right now, I suppose things are changing pretty rapidly. The boards, they were backing Raelene Castles, and all of a sudden, 24 hours, 48 hours later, she didn't have their full support. So we don't know everything outside the boardroom. I mean, if they see Phil Kearns being there, it's probably something we see happen pretty quickly. But there's a few other names that have been thrown out. So they probably will do their due diligence and work through the different options. It might not be someone that's in the boys' club that we're seeing there for a long period of time. But yeah, look, I mean, there's probably no massive rush at the moment. Things have got to settle. The dust has got to settle a little bit on what's happened and see if they can find the best way forward. If they seem like they're rushing into it, I think there's going to be a little bit more stink kicked up because this is supposed to be something they don't have a plan behind the scenes, that they haven't told anyone, and that she was always going because they threw the support behind her.
Yeah. Thank you, Nelson, and thank you for your time. And I know you guys celebrate. You're wearing the right jersey for Anzac Day, celebrating Australia. Well done, mate. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for.
Cheers, bud.
See you guys.
Moving on now, gentlemen, we've got our two new guests, Usisa Mafu and Tabela Mdaka, joining the Australian saga. Sisa, I'm going to jump into you, mate. What are your thoughts in terms of what's currently happening in Australia with the whole resignation of Raelene Castles?
It's very interesting, Bila. You know, the power struggle that's happening there right now. Just listening to Nelson as a person that's obviously in the country and experiencing it on a day-to-day. And what we've been reading, Tina, on the side, whether it's been on Twitter, on the news, etc., and how it's just going to affect the greater rugby sort of dynamic in Australia, which is currently in a weak spot, in my opinion. You know, they had a terrible end to the year last year with a quite a poor performance at the World Cup.
Yeah.
Raelene was sort of trying to clean house in her way, which then didn't sort of speak to the more traditional Australian rugby, if I can put it that way. It's very interesting to listen to Nelson, to hear him say people like Phil Kearns, who works for Fox Sports, and Nick Farr-Jones, and people like Bob Dwyer in terms of the comments that they're making. Yeah. It's just very interesting, man. Not knowing the full story. I mean, we only know what we read and what we watch. So it's something to keep an eye on, and it would be interesting to see how it affects their rugby going forward.
Yeah. Toby, I mean, let's say now you are Dave Rennie in this situation, in this turmoil, in this uncertain times in Australian rugby. I mean, would you jump ship, or would you stay and just basically wait and assess and see how things pan out for the future?
Well, I think we're also not quite sure what the situation was, with the whole resignation. For instance, we've been talking about this for the past 2 to 3 weeks, trying to find out what exactly is happening in Australia, and what the turmoil is, and what the repercussions are going to be throughout this whole saga. So it is very interesting what's happening there currently. And I think it was also quite surprising to see how the Australian board completely turned around, because originally they were backing Raelene Castles a week ago. And now things have turned completely upside down. For them to remove her just like that, it obviously shows how much power that Fox Sports has currently in that Australian boardroom. Yeah. So we're all not sure what's going to happen to Australian rugby, but I think they need to do a lot of reshuffling as well. If Raelene Castles is out, who's going to come in? Who's going to steady that ship? And whoever comes in, are they going to make a positive change in Australian rugby?
Fair. So, Toby speaks about Fox Sport. Fox Sport is basically a media entity. You in the media journalist environment. I mean, is this a case of media abusing their power?
No, mate. This is for the court for broadcasters. Believe me, especially your private subscription-based broadcasters. They wield incredible power all over the world. They decide fixtures. They decide kickoff times. They definitely play in the boardroom big time. I mean, imagine something similar with South Africa. Remember when Cricket South Africa took the Mzansi Super League, or the Global T20 it was then, when it was first launched and didn't take off, and they sidelined SuperSport. Remember the shitstorm that ensued from that. This is similar. What Raelene Castles did is very, very similar to what Cricket South Africa did when they sidelined SuperSport from the Mzansi Super League. It does not go down well with the politics around the sport, with the boardroom. I don't wanna take Australia's blooms and bring them home, but you will find that Fox Sports, their interest is making sure that the sport, rugby union, is locked in behind their subscription pay channel, and and it's kind of hurt them in a way, because the demand for rugby union in Australia has gone down significantly from what it was when Super Rugby first came about, 95, 96. So I reckon her intentions were very, very good. in terms of expanding the game and getting and reaching a younger audience, because the young sporting audience is what you're looking for. If you're looking at it influences your national team at the end of the day, because if you're not attracting the talent, the sporting talent that comes in Australia year in, year out, you're not going to be a competitive team. And it's shown. Like, I think they labored to the Rugby World Cup final in 2015. I think that was purely because of Michael Checker's force of will. He was still a commanding coach at the time, but he lost a lot of power. And the more he tried to get things out of players that they just simply could not produce. I mean, the Waratahs team he was coaching in 2014 to the Super Rugby title, to the 2019 Wallabies team, you can tell it's like the caliber of player, guys have aged. They're not totally not exactly at the peak. There's no Falau. So it all sort of influences each other. It's all part of the same ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, Vic, as a coach, I think I asked Toby this pretty much similar question. But I mean, as a coach, guys, uncertainty, and where does Dave Rennie sit between? Because the thing is, we know Raelene Castles is a Kiwi. We know Dave Rennie is a Kiwi. You know, they have some sort of relationship. But I mean, as a coach, the uncertain times, you want to be secure. You want to know that your contract is set in stone, and you don't want your CEO that just employed you to be fired or to have resigned.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tough one. It's a tough one to. Of obviously Dave Rennie's caliber, there comes a time where he is done with coaching club rugby. You know what I mean? So his time at the Glasgow was done. He made the final last year. He's achieved some good stuff with Glasgow. So for him now, he wants his next step. And whether it's going to be with Raelene Castles in the mix or not, he wants his next international gig. He wants point. What I would do as a coach, I mean, it's only my opinion, is that I would sit down with the new CEO coming in, asking exactly what they expect of me, and then obviously going through in terms of the board as well, and maybe presenting your 4-year plan to the board and see if they buy into it. At the end of the day, he's going to have to take the chance if he wants to coach internationally, or he has to wait another 4 years. And we all know that those jobs are hard to find.
I think that's where we should leave it with in terms of Australian rugby currently, guys. Even though we will see, I mean, some news coming out probably in the next couple of days, but we'll keep a close eye on what's happening down under. All right, gentlemen, moving away from Australia now, we're bringing things back to South Africa, keeping it local. We've heard a bit of news, basically, that Joseph Dweba, the Cheetahs hooker, is linked to Bordeaux in France. I mean, we've had a couple of players from South Africa now starting to go and ply their trade over in France. Smoo, I want you to jump into this one. I mean, I'm hearing that this won't affect his selection for the Springboks, basically. But was he going to be a Springbok in 2020?
I reckon he was definitely going to be a Springbok this year, due to not only his own performances, but the fact that Ubomi Mbonambi is injured, the fact that Malcolm Marx is playing in a rather below par league in Japan. I think Joseph Dweba's chances are still pretty good because, you know, with Felix Jones being the bona fide overseas Springbok scout there to look after guys who are on the Springbok radar. So I think for him, it works out quite well. Personally, I would have liked him to stay in South Africa. I think the jump for him to go to France might affect his confidence if he doesn't get there and command a start and get the minutes that he's enjoyed at the Cheetahs in the last 2 years. I think he's one of the players that have started almost every game, along with Junior Popomela and those guys. I think he's done phenomenally well. Last year, I thought he was within a sniff of making the World Cup squad. I wouldn't have been surprised if he was the wild card.
Wait a minute. Does he leapfrog the likes of Oscar, who've been grafting at Super Rugby level? I mean, he's playing Pro 14. What are the chances of a Pro 14 player leapfrogging a Super Rugby player?
You see, that's the thing. That's why I thought it would have been like better for him to stay in South Africa. Like, for instance, if he joins the Sharks and he's scrumming with Oxen Chair as well as Thomas Tutoy, so he's going to be part of a Springbok package. So that's going to speak on his behalf. Like, look at how Lizo Koboka became a Springbok. He was part of the package that, that had Trevor Nyakane, Scout Brits, and himself as the loose head. Yeah. It's a package deal. And look at the Storm. Mascara is definitely also going to be in the Springbok mix because he's part of that Frans Malherbe, Steve Kitsoff package. That's how front rows work best. So I think on that score, it does affect him a little bit. He's not sort of as nailed on as he would have been. I thought for me the Sharks had him last year, but they wouldn't buy him out. But Jake White was interested in bringing him to the Bulls as well this year. But I think the kid is just, someone told me recently, an ex-Springbok coach, that players with money is always going to be a deciding factor with South African players, that money is always going to be a higher rating than the Springbok jersey. And I suspect this might have been the case. And look, just finally on Joseph, it's possible that he wasn't getting a fair contract at the Cheetahs either, because they're known to underpay players. So maybe he's got a bit of financial ground to cover up on his personal side. So I'm definitely not knocking his decision at all.
Fair. You bring in Jake White and the Blue Bulls. We've got a player like Ashley Johnson being linked to the Blue Bulls. I mean, is Jake White trying to bring a lot of overseas talent into the Blue Bulls setup? You've had a sit down with him. You've had a chat with him. What is his general idea or his general plan into the Blue Bulls setup? Because now, just a few days ago, we've had the CEO of the Blue Bulls also also resigning. I mean, is he shaking up things in Pretoria?
Okay, so let me separate the CEO resignation from Jake White. I'm told that the CEO's resignation has a lot less to do with rugby than it does with personal conduct. So I'm not going to divulge any more than that.
No, share with us. The public wants to know, mate.
The information is not verified yet, and I'm not a one-source kind of guy. But from early doors, I'm told that he's fallen on his sword. That he, in his dealings, he might not have acted accordingly, and he's just had to step aside, and that's all I can say for now. So it would have been a surprise to Jake as well. But as far as what Jake is doing, I think the shake-up is going to be in the coaching. Don't be surprised if Pote Human is the next one out the door, because I'm told that he might be demoted to forwards coach, and the decision will then be up to him whether he wants to take the demotion and be forwards coach or take his chance.
But what is he still? Wait. What is he still doing there, Pote Human? I mean, he's had his time, he's had his tenure. It's time for new blood. Seriously, it's time for new thoughts, new ideas, new innovations. Pote Human has been in the system for 100 years.
This is the Bulls we're talking about, bro. They very much stick to what they know. Only really recently with the signing of John Mitchell, and even then they didn't even seem like they were all in, which made it easy for John Mitchell to leave and go to England. Yeah, they preferred. I mean, look at Pine Pienaar, for instance, is their defense coach, which for me has to be one of the most pathetic defense coaches around. He almost relegated the Bulls as the Kyrie Cup head coach in 2013 or 2015.
Bring Cesar into it, because I think Pine Pienaar was still working with Cesar, was still at the Blue Bulls.
Yeah.
No, he was still in Free State then.
Okay, speaking of defensive structures and coaches, Smoo, I know you know Joey Mongalo for quite some time. I want to bring in Cesar into this one. I mean, we've seen the impact that Joey had in terms of defensive structures and defensive patterns that the Lions, when he was at the Lions, that they had. I mean, it's been to the finals. We've seen what has happened in this year's opening 6 to 7 rounds, how the Lions performed in terms of their defensive pattern, which was in tatters. They've conceived quite a lot of tries in the opening half of Super Rugby. A guy like Joey Mongalo going to the Blue Bulls, I mean, how much of an impact will he have with given the freedom that Jake White probably will allow him to express himself in that environment? I mean, how important would Joey Mongalo be at the Blue Bulls?
So from a personal perspective, I'm very excited for Joey. You know, it's almost like a homecoming for him. I mean, we all know that he played his junior rugby in the province, from high school all the way up to the junior ranks and maybe a little bit of senior rugby as well. So also his journey, as you pointed out, his journey with the Lions, for example, defensively was amazing. Amazing record. He brought a new way of thinking, you might say. He brought some imagination to an otherwise very traditional union. You know, in a time where the Lions were seen as now being the innovative team, the top team in South Africa, you know, with their attack and defense. So that's what I think he'll bring to the Bulls. He'll bring imagination. He'll bring youth. He'll bring some excitement. And also, I mean, nowadays the defensive is sort of like a cult figure within a squad. You know, I mean, our new Springbok coach is a defensively inclined coach. So everyone is on that sort of boat, right? And I wish Joey all the best. You know, it's obviously going to be tough with the Bulls in the situation they are in at the moment. Pretty much with no sort of light at the end of the tunnel, but I know for a fact that it will bring some excitement, it will bring some exuberance into the system, and hopefully,
hopefully, man. Toby,
can I
we see? Jump in.
Don't move on from Joey. Joey just finished his master's in psychology as well. So I think the working under Jake White will also help him develop as a potential future head coach. So this is just a step in the direction where his career is going. As much as he will influence the defense of the Bulls, I reckon he's going to learn bucket loads under Jake if you go in there with the right attitude. And he'll come out a much more rounded coach.
Do you think Rassie should add him into his coaching squad, seeing that he's the director?
No, I don't think, not for now. You know, a lot of our guys, especially Black African coaches, need the time in the provincial as well as the franchise structures. You know, I would like that, you know, there to be some sort of a pathway, you know, that it's not defined right now, but maybe a guy like Joey could define a pathway for Omzwake Nkosi or Piwe Nomlomo, you know, say, okay, this guy made it through these various steps, and we can create a pathway for those guys that will follow after him. I mean, there's still Bafana and Tleko. So I wouldn't like the jump to be too dramatic, because the fall will be also quite as dramatic. So let's give it time.
Yeah, Vuyo, I mean, you are a current coach. I mean, with the Southern Kings, as an assistant, obviously. I mean, do you think that Osmo is correct in saying that the pathway should be there in those in your progress as you make it through the ranks until the Springbok level? Do you think that it is good for a coach to start off at the bottom and work his way through, or do you think a guy like Joey could just jump through the hoops and make it straight to the top?
I think for me, I would agree with you on that one, that you need to obviously pay your dues. Everything is a stepping stone, starting obviously at the bottom and working your way up. Obviously, the knowledge of the game, but what's important in your innovation. Like Usisa said, that Ucho is very innovative. So for me, I agree with Usbu in the sense where he has to go through the ranks, and I would definitely say he should never get involved in the Springboks as long as Jacques Naba is there, because every defense coach has his own mindset, has his own DNA. Yeah. So Jacques' DNA might be way too different to Joey's, and because now Joey would come in as a second fiddle, he will influence Joey in thinking the way that Jacques Naba thinks. So you kind of have two defensive coaches in the system. In the whole system, actually, in terms of from the main team to the junior level team, the system has to be a flow, has to be one. So if he stakes at the Bulls, I would, if obviously with Jake, if Jake's vision is for him to defend the same way in the junior levels, then it's perfect. Then he's running his system. He's what we're calling building a system. Then by the time he gets into the box, then everything in terms of exactly what Jacques Naba has done with the SC under-20s, SC schools, Joey can then influence that. But at the moment, he would never be able to influence it if there's another person who's sort of running the defensive side of it.
Awesome. Fantastic. Toby, I want to bring you here. I'll bring you in.
Jump in there quickly as well.
Yes,
you must also there aren't that many black coaches currently in the system, especially at high level rugby. If he would now move from where he is and straight into the Springboks, it will be a case of if he fails, he almost kills the pathway of everyone that's coming through as a black coach. That's why those steps are for him to have that record, so that time he gets to the Springbok, he has his colours and say, "This is my track record. I'm in here because I deserve it." Whereas it's a case of, okay, someone black to fit into the system. They bring him in, he fails. Now all of the other guys that were looking in that system to come up, he's almost going to stamp them down, and everyone's going to say, look what happened when we brought Joey in. So those are the things we need to be careful of as well. So bringing him in slowly is the best thing I think SA Rugby could do, and the Bulls. If
but Toby, you're the one that jumped straight from high school into senior rugby.
And look where I ended up. I was injured half my career. So, but yeah.
So basically, it does take its toll for a player to be moved from a very junior level straight up into senior level. I mean, you've had your fair share of experiences, Toby.
Yeah, for me, it definitely does. I think being brought in slowly makes a huge difference than just jumping in straight from high school into a senior rugby level. You get there, you intimidated. You know, there's a lot of things that can build or break a player. It also comes in where who your coach is at the time. Is your coach giving you enough, training time, play time? So there's a plenty, there's a lot of things that, like I said, can really break a player if you just jump straight from high school into senior rugby.
Toby, I'm laughing. Toby, I'm laughing because I'm thinking as soon as you said that there's things that can break a player, I'm thinking of Reno Benjamin. Yeah, Reno's a problem.
Jeez. I want to bring Usmu into this one. We've got our Pro 14 teams now in Eastern Southern Kings and Free State. Free State seems to be bringing in some high caliber players into their structures. They've had Pienaar coming in. Now we're hearing that Frans Steyn might be coming to Bloemfontein. I mean, what are your thoughts in having ex-Springbok players now going back to where it all started in Bloemfontein?
Well, it just means that at least they'll leave the Kings alone for one more year, hopefully. But on a serious note, I think, look, I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all. There's obviously Frans Steyn is not doing it as a charity project. He wants to boost his chances to make British and Irish Lions for next year. And Ruan Pienaar, for him, it was a personal decision. He wanted to be closer to his family. And I imagine for Frans Steyn, same thing. We saw Yanni du Plessis coming back, Willem Albert, all those guys. And look, for me, the principle of it, I'm not against it. I'm not against guys coming back to South Africa if they can still play. If they can make the South African challenge in Pro 14, if it can be stronger, then all the better. I would love to see a lot more of those guys actually go to the Kings. Like a guy like Lionel Cronje maybe come back, to to the Kings, man. Like, and a few other guys that have left the Kings, your James Halls is, that have left the Kings right when the Kings were about to do something really, really great. So I don't mind it at all. I'm all about the lay of the land to be even in rugby, and I would much rather like to see if South African rugby had the control that New Zealand rugby has over its franchises, whereby they can divvy up the talent among the franchises. Maybe you wouldn't have a Ruan Pienaar and a Frans Steyn going to the same union. You'd have one of them going to the Kings and one of them going to, which would benefit the pool of rugby in South Africa instead of having guys bunched up in one union. But look, we need the experience. Jake White, we were talking earlier, might bring Ashley Johnson in. I think his biggest influence is he wants to bring more experience to the Bulls. The Bulls have a very young team, and they lost 10 players last year. 6, I think, were World Cup winners. So that's a massacre by anyone's estimation to lose that many senior players. So yeah, I don't mind it at all, and good to him, Frank. I hope he can bring it.
James, when thinking about this Frans Steyn, obviously we're playing against them. We play against the Cheetahs probably in the next season. So the way I look at it is that how much influence the head coach of the South African rugby has on the signing, because at the end of the day, Frans Steyn is not going to make the next World Cup. So who is Frans Steyn's position? So who's going to take? Whose position is going to take when he gets there? And obviously, any coach is going to back a senior player, World Cup winning player, than a junior player coming up. So as a Springbok, obviously head coach, then I would suggest that obviously having the chat with the union head coaches and saying Frans Steyn can't start 90% of the games. He has to start maybe, let's say, 45 or maybe 55% of the games. Get the juniors coming through so that they're learning from him. Because at the moment, if you look at what the Cheetahs did with Ruan Pienaar and I think it was Van Zyl, they were rotating him, but not once did you see the third scrum up. He never came through. So what happened to the third scrum up? Whereas now they should have been saying as a head of the motherboard union, they should have been saying, where is the third scrum up? We need to see him, because if Ruan now retires, what's going to happen is that a young kid from Varsity Cup is going to get thrown in there and is going to fail. Then that's how we start losing players.
No, fair. You make a very valid point, Vuyo. But now I want to just move into the enforcer, the man called brute force at the Cheetahs, Sintu Manjezi. Sisa, as a forward, I mean, I'm sure you've seen a couple of Sintu Manjezi's games. What are your thoughts when it comes to this player? I mean, apparently he's very strong. He makes big tackles. He's not afraid to get into the ruck. Do we see a good pathway for him from Cheetahs, maybe into a Super Rugby team, then Springboks?
I really like him. Very athletic young guy, good with ball in hand, great hands as well, which are all nice sort of ingredients to make quite a solid lock forward. I read somewhere that there's a rumor that the Bulls might be interested in him, which made me very, very happy, and I hope it's true, because I think the earlier and the sooner he gets into a sort of Super Rugby environment, the better for him and his progress. I think honestly as well, he's on the radar in terms of Rusty. The signs are there, man. He's a very solid player. I wouldn't want to go on a whole tangent about him, but for me, he's a very solid player with all the right sort of ingredients to make world class.
Vic, I mean, you guys have played against the Cheetahs quite a lot in the Pro 14. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's two teams that I've heard. It's the Bulls and the Stormers. So I see Smooth says maybe it is the Bulls, but I've heard it's the So we don't know. I mean, that news will come out sometime soon. But looking at okay, so I've been watching him growing up, and when went to Greek was, and from Greek was he made it to the Cheetahs. The kid has come from low, obviously rugby, and he's made it. It's very tough to find that from a lot. He was hitting massive numbers in terms of line-out steals. He was hitting massive numbers in terms of running meters, ball carries. So you talking about a player here that's hungry to play. And I think it's a type from Pro 14 based on the weather conditions that we play in. But I mean, if you can go to Super Rugby and obviously play with a team like the Bulls, that will be more forward dominant, then 100% for him.
Smooth, isn't there too much congestion? Aren't there too many players currently at the Bulls, or does he just slot in if he does go to Blue Bulls?
Put it this way, the Bulls brought in Ian Groenewald, the 28-year-old that hadn't played a single Super Rugby game and last played real rugby at Varsity 4 years prior. Did the rounds at Griquas, and he was there, new hope. So, mate, if he comes to the Bulls, he plays, he starts every single game. And there's no question about it. Uchiga is a baller. He's got hands. He like, he's physical. He's a quality player. He's what I thought Abongile Nongodwana would turn out to be. But unfortunately, he hasn't. Like, Uchiga's just come out and just blown guys aside. Yeah. And I like the fact that he came through as an underdog and guys didn't think much of him, and he had to go out there and prove himself.
Yeah.
Just on that, Pila, sorry man, just to add on that, since Usbu is mentioning one or two other young talented players. So for me, Sintu, like, I have him in a box of players that I really rate. Young black players like Junior Popomela, himself, very athletic boys that are unassuming, right? But very, very good. Like, I mean, I'm so proud to look at a player like U's Kumbuzo Noche right now. Perfect environment for his type of game. The coach has literally said to him, you know what, go out there and show what you can do. Yeah. In the simplest form, right? Those type of players for me are what the future of South African rugby is about, right? Yeah. Where it's not about your hurly-burly, big guys running around the field, trotting around the field, taking off one-off runners and stuff like that, but rather guys that can give you options on defense, options on attack, and I think those type of players for me is what our Super Rugby needs, and more obviously in Pro 14 as well. But for me, it would be great if we can get more of those type of players.
Fantastic. I just want Toby to jump into this, because Toby, does coaches in South Africa actually give our players enough freedom to express themselves on the park?
I don't think currently that's the case, because for me it feels like everyone needs to play under certain structure, especially with the teams like the Bulls, the Cheetahs, the Stormers. I think the Lions tried to kind of break that system where they gave a lot of their players a lot of freedom, say, play your way, play the game you want to play. You have a lot of freedom, as much as there is a bit of structure in the team, but they did give a lot of freedom to their players. But I think in general in South African rugby, a lot of players don't have that freedom. You could take it all the way to Springbok level. You could see the structure that it is there, that the freedom isn't really there. Should you make a crucial mistake, for instance, trying out whatever you're trying to do, whether it's a backflip pass that causes an intercept and you lose the game, you're likely not to start the following weekend. I don't think the players get enough freedom in South Africa compared to Australia and New Zealand. The players, they play with a lot of freedom. But I think, we actually almost need to bring in a few more international coaches, whether it's from they come in just to almost breed in our youth coaches, not just bringing them in to say, okay, here's a Super Rugby side, coach the side, but almost in a case of they just being mentors for our younger coaches, just to show them the ropes of how to give their players a lot of freedom, give them that confidence to almost go out and try new things. Because confidence goes a long way, in any sport. If a player's broken down after trying something out in the park, that could kill their confidence. And then after that, you basically try and stick and do what you need to do. You don't want to almost go out of the norm. You want to stick to what the coaches has taught and what the coaches want you to do.
Fair enough. I mean, looking at a player like Oscar, we can see he's been given the freedom to express himself on the park. I mean, he's shown to us what he's capable of. Something that we probably did not see when he was when he was in Cape Town. I mean, does the coaching staff have anything to do with what's currently happening in Durban with the Sharks? Because we've got a lot of Eastern Cape blood coming through there in the coaching setup. You've got Van Rensburg from Eastern Cape, he was at Queens. You've got Dave Williams, he was at Hudson Park. You've got Pure Nomlomo, he was at Selborne College. And then now you've got the Eastern Cape backline players and a bit of forwards in the mix as well. I mean, does it make it easier for a player to, in their surroundings, to have such an environment where everyone knows each other? There's a bit of closer here and there from the coaches, from the players. There's a bit of understanding. I mean, Vuyo or Toby, actually, jump in here. I mean, does it make a difference for a player in that environment as Wazu's expressor?
Yeah, for my side, I think it makes a massive difference. For example, I think, any coaching staff would love to have 2 or 3 winning World Cup players coming into a squad because it just boosts the squad. I mean, it's amazing. It just boosts everything. So besides the coaches coming from the Eastern Cape, I don't think that has to do much with the success of the Sharks. I think the environment has to do with everything. How Sean Everett has made the environment comfortable, how Sean Everett has made the environment conducive for everyone. So the most important thing is about accountability. Any coach who believes in accountability will definitely succeed in that in whichever setup they go to, based on the fact that you make players accountable for what they're trying to do. Like Toby saying, if you make a mistake, you can't be dropped for the mistake. You must be dropped. You must be dropped for not acknowledging, and also not agreeing with the mistake you just made. So if you agree with the mistake and you actually work and you improve it, it makes a massive difference in terms of coaching. So I think for me, the most importantly is the whole system is a positive environment based on the fact that that's how Sean Everett and Van Rensburg and obviously Williams have created.
Okay, gents, that brings an end to our local content. I want to move into international side of things. We've had Eddie Jones put out a video and talking about how good this situation will be for rugby as a whole. He spoke about things like having hybrid players, having smaller squads, having players that can actually play different positions. So we've seen quite a lot of that from New Zealand side of things, where you'll find a Ben Smith who can slot in at center, who can slot in at fullback, who can slot in on the wing even. Toby, you've actually had a few runs at fullback and on the wing. I mean, do you think what Eddie Jones is saying is a good thing, or is a good thing going forward in terms of rugby, minimizing the squads, or do we still stick to the normal way of doing things, having 8 players on the bench and seeing how the Springboks actually utilized their bench over in the World Cup and how useful it was for them to have different splits amongst their bench? Do you think what Eddie Jones is saying is good for the game?
I don't think it's necessarily good for the game as such, because you want those specialist players in their specialist positions. So I think what Eddie Jones is mainly talking about there is that it's becoming a more financial game more than anything. Yeah. So if you're looking for more players that are versatile, it means you want to cut your squad for financial costs. It's got nothing to do with almost having a better squad by cutting so that you have versatile players who can play the different positions. If anything, it's going to make a lot of teams weaker. Like I said, if you have specialist players for specialist positions, it will almost make things so much easier for you. It becomes very difficult, for example, looking at specialist positions like hooker. Now you're having a prop that has to slot in at hooker. They need to learn how to throw, those type of things. It's either you, for instance, with a hooker, you probably maybe look for a loose forward who can come and slot in at hooker instead of a prop. So things like that make things very difficult. It's also quite hard when the fullback needs to move to fly half, because those are the positional changes that a lot of coaches look at. So for me, if it wasn't a financial strain, I would say it's better to stick with, fixed positions for those players. But it makes a lot of sense because of the current times we're in and the current times, and the future times we're going into. So it definitely makes a lot of sense for players to start training themselves with different positions. Also, in most cases, the players that are versatile and can play different positions are always good for the bench and not for starting. So those are the things that a lot of, you need to look at as a coach.
Buyo, you are a coach with the Kings. I mean, actually moving back, you could actually play yourself at 15, at wing, at 10. I mean, how useful is that for you as a player? I mean, being able to slot into any position on the field.
Yeah, look, I think it is useful to have that, but like Toby said, you still need specialists. You still need specialist positions on the field. I believe a hooker could never be replaced by a prop. So prop can jump into both props like Trevor Nyakane has done. I think for me, the most important is that we need to identify as coaches the specialist positions that should never have people that can play both. And also, you don't want to be a Ian Healy who can play from 9 to 15. Was it Ian Healy from England? So you don't want to be the position because, yes, you're never going to start because like Chobi said, you're going to be on the bench. And we all know starting is the ultimate for any rugby player. So specialist position is important, but I guess like Eddie Johnson said, it's going to become a money game at the end of the day. Instead of contracting 2 players for 4 million each, you're going to contract 1 player for 6 million. So you still save 2 million. So at the end of the day, it's all about the money, and unfortunately, that's where the rugby is going at the moment.
Sbu and Sisa, your thoughts?
Well, I'm looking at it in 2 ways. I'm looking at it obviously with the current situation we're in terms of the virus. So from a financial point of view, and then from a rugby point of view, right? So the financial point of view, yes, it makes sense to cut down because obviously people, owners or CEOs or top management maybe can't handle financially having big squads or whatever, right? That's and I don't really think much of that. So I'll leave the comment there. The second one is from a rugby perspective. So rugby for me has and is way back in the line of sort of sports, right? Of big sports. So your footballs of the world, your American footballs, your NFLs, those big sports with big squads, right? Where you have certain guys that are specialists in their positions. And are world beaters, right? That's what sort of team sport and team culture has come to, in the 21st century.
I think Pisho should take over.
Yeah, no, 100%. A lot of change is needed currently in rugby. The sooner we get in someone with who's going to bring in something different, a lot of innovation is needed. The sooner the better. Like we said, rugby union is dying very fast. Like Smoo mentioned, in Australia, if they don't change anything in the next 10, 15 years, rugby is going to be extinct there. Everyone's going to go out and play, Aussie rules and rugby league. So the sooner we get the structure to change, the sooner we bring in innovation and new things, bringing all the nations together, getting that global game playing. I think like what we mentioned, I think last week, a few weeks back, to almost bring in that global competition where, or, the North versus South at a club level, or, where it's Super Rugby included, as well as, with the UK teams, or the Tri-Nations.
Global game, yeah.
Global game, but instead of having it like 4 years, maybe do that every 2 years, just to bring in that global game, like we mentioned a couple of weeks back.
Just to jump in there, gents, I think.
All right, gentlemen.
Just to jump in there, Pilar, when it comes to Augustin Pichot, I also like him in terms of coming in, but as new blood, my worry is that what changes is going to bring. For example, my thought is he's from Argentina. He lives in obviously the borders of Uruguay and Argentina. He's got restaurants that side and everything. What is his thoughts in terms of taking the big tournaments to that side of the world, to the South American side of the world? That's the dangers of what I'm thinking. I'm worried about, because at the end of the day, he's also going to be looking out for his own, just like any other person is looking out for their own. So that's going to be the worry. And is it going to be is it going to be driven towards personal gain, or is it going to be driven towards the game for the game in global?
Yeah. I mean, so far he has said that he wants a global game. So we'll have to see, basically. I mean, what pans out from him is from what he said in the past. So we'll see from tomorrow, once the voting comes in, and we know probably in the next few weeks who the next chairman will be. If he wins, then we'll basically put him to the task and see what he comes up with. I just want to move to our last segment, gentlemen. We've had some of the best blindside flankers in the world. We've had World Cup winning blindside flankers. But for this discussion alone, we've got Jerome Kaino versus Pieter-Steph du Toit. Very short, very quickly. Who is your choice? I'm going to go one by one. I'll start with a blindside flanker or / eighth man himself. Actually, and also a wing at times when he wants, because in high school I saw him running on the wing more than getting stuck in at run time. Mafu, I'm coming to you, mate. Best blindside between the two, and explain to me why.
Jerome Kaino, just classic. Big, burly, agile, great hands, can tackle, can shift bodies, can cross the advantage line at will. Is a line-out option. Great second phase option, second phase ball carrier option to get you good position in the middle of the field. So that's simple as that. Jerome Kaino, without a doubt.
Toby, you're up next.
I think I'm also sticking with Jerome Kaino here. He's a more all-round player compared to Pieter-Steph. His defense is on point. His attack is on point. He brings a lot of options. His ball skills, are right up there. And I think with all of us here, we're probably the old generation of rugby. I don't see anyone here choosing Pieter-Steph, but we'll see how the other guys go. But like I said, for me, Jerome Kaino is a complete package. Pieter-Steph is more of, the type of player who wants ball in hand. That's the only time you'll actually see him really, really thriving. Whereas Jerome Kaino also gets stuck in the rucks. He's also one of those types of players where you don't really see, but he's doing all the hard work within the rucks.
Interesting. Smooth, your turn.
I think that Toby is trying to play a little bit of some Mourinho games with that. trying to live rent-free in our minds. But I have to go Jerome Kaino as well. I don't think we've seen enough of Pieter-Steph, to be honest. At the Sharks, barely saw him at all. He blew both his ACLs, boom, boom, like he was shot 1 year after the other. We only really saw what they could do when he joined the Stormers. And at Springbok level, I would say really that if we're getting into the nitty-gritty of how well he has been playing, it's only been the last couple of years. And I know last year was very good, and the year before that it was pretty sensational. But Jerome Kaino's 10, 12 years, mate, of doing it at the highest level. I remember when he was an under 20, when it was, I think, still the under 21 IRB championship, and he was in the New Zealand team. He was like, it was like a man playing against kids. I thought Jerry Collins was probably the scariest figure in rugby that I grew up watching. But then when I saw Jerome Kaino, I thought, flipping out, another 10 years of this. I thought he was just a nightmare on the field. The one thing about a rugby player, especially a blindside flanker, I'm sure Sisa will agree with me on this, is that there are certain players that relish the tackle, that every hit that they make has to be a positive tackle, that they don't want to lose a step in the tackle before they've even touched the ball, before they've done anything. Once they get that hit or a couple of those hits, then you know they're in for a good game. They're like bloodthirsty. I think there are very few of those players, and that relish that kind of physicality before they get the ball in their hands. I think Peter Steff is more inclined, like Toby said, to want the ball first, to have a feel for the ball, win a line out, steal a line out here and there, do all the other things, before getting really, really physical.
Save the best for last. Let's go, Vickers, Miranda.
Yeah, so I think it's already 3-0, so I'm going to take it to 4-0. I think for me, Jerome Kaino, like Sboer said, for me, a blindside flanker, first rule number one, you can never make a low tackle. You're not allowed to make a low tackle. All your tackles must be carrying people backwards, throwing them backwards. And that's Jerome Kaino. So if I had to compare, obviously, the Dupree brothers, the twins, when they were growing up, I could see Jerome Kaino in the twins. But now, obviously, they've left and gone overseas. For me, number 7 is simple. Tackles must be dominant, choke tackles, throwing people back, throwing people off. That's what a blindside flanker is. And I fail to see that in obviously Peter Steff. He makes a lot of tackles, he makes a lot of ground. But again, if you look at Jerome Kaino, he doesn't need to make a lot of ground if he's got an open side flanker who's going to be chasing all the tackles.
Yeah.
He just needs to make sure that when time comes, he's dominant in the hits and he's disrupting everything like Sboer said. So Jerome Kaino will be the easy win for me. Valid points, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us on the Sports Interval, the rugby edition. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for taking time out and joining us on the Sports Interval. Really appreciate you guys taking time out. This show was brought to you by MAT. You can visit www.matconsulting.co.za.